You're watching BBC World News live from the Olympic Park in London. My name is Komla Dumont. Here are the latest headlines. The British Olympic team has achieved its best Olympics gold medal tally for 104 years. After day 11, their gold medal tally at London 2012 stands at 22. The human rights group Amnesty International has published images it says proves the use of heavy weapons by Syrian government forces and says both sides could be charged with war crimes. Egypt says it's carried out airstrikes against suspected Islamic militants in the Sinai Peninsula, with reports of up to 20 people killed. And in just a few minutes, I'll be looking at today's papers with Bundeep Singh Rangar, the chairman of IndusView. It's great to have you on the program. We'll get to that in a moment, but Britain's Colin Jackson was a great 110-meter hurdler. During his career, he was the Commonwealth, European, and the world champion. He also broke the world record and won Olympic silver in Seoul in 1988. So when the Games came to Barcelona, he was widely expected to achieve his ultimate ambition and win gold. But as he explains in our latest postcard, things didn't go according to plan.
Well, 1992 Olympic Games in Barcelona was a very unique opportunity for me in my sporting career. I arrived at the Olympic venue as the world #1 with lots of expectations and excitement of what I could possibly achieve. My achievements up to then were pretty good, but I wanted to become the Olympic champion because that was my all-time dream. And to arrive at the Olympic Games as the favourite is a really incredible experience. And my first round went remarkably well, and so did my second round and my semi-final. But unfortunately, I picked up an injury after my second round, which really cost me my ability to take the title and also achieve my dream. I ended up finishing 7th, which was a bitter disappointment for me. And of course, I lost my magical Olympic gold moment. As you know, as an athlete, there's a time when you reach your peak, and that was my time. And that's what makes the Olympic Games, I guess, really special, because it's a time and it's a moment in your life.
Britain's Colin Jackson explaining the frustration of being beaten in Barcelona. He is still one of the greats. We have lots more memories from Olympic athletes to share with you in our postcard series every day here on BBC World News. It's now time to take a look at what's making newspaper headlines around the world. The British bank Standard Chartered has hit back hard against U.S. attempts to cast it as a rogue institution for allegedly breaching sanctions on Iran, says the Financial Times. The International Herald Tribune details Iran's warning to the world that it stands by Syria following a meeting between a top Iranian official and Syria's President Assad. That story illustrated with this striking photo of a Syrian rebel fighter in central Aleppo. Pressure is mounting on Italy's prime minister, says the Gulf News business page, with figures showing the economy shrank by 0.7% in the second quarter. An Olympic treat for Greggs, says the Independent. I like this story. The UK's biggest baker of pasties pastry has smashed sales records. I guess my mouth is watering, at its branch next to the Olympic Park, with takings up as much as 80%. The Guardian heralds Britain's biggest gold medal haul since 1908, helped along by the country's most successful Olympian cyclist, Sir Chris Hoy. And the Times has the story of the British brothers who won the men's triathlon, Yorkshire Brownlee winning the gold and his younger brother Johnny taking home the bronze. Now to discuss these, I'm joined by Bundeep Singh Rangar, who's the chairman of IndusView. It's great to have you back on the program at our Olympic location. Let's start with the Financial Times, and this story broke yesterday. It's been in headlines around the world, and now Standard Chartered is responding and saying that the allegations are untrue. But I think perhaps what's interesting is their quote from a senior industry figure who says that this is big enough for number 10 to now intervene.
Well, Standard Chartered is such a venerable institution. It's got its roots in Asia. It started off in Mumbai, Calcutta, and Shanghai. And to this date, 70% of its revenue comes from Asia. So the UK, US, Europe operations, the entire Western world, it's about 14% of their profit. So it's not a huge impact in terms of where its core business is, but it's a hugely negative message. And you know what investors do not like is uncertainty. So the uncertainty around this deal is, what further investigations will there be? These $250 billion worth of transactions that supposedly occurred between 2001 and 2007 on behalf of the Iranian government and companies, does that lend itself to a money laundering case? Because the New York regulator and the investigator right now has limited power in terms of how far it can go in terms of punitive damages But if it opens up, and a lot of things come out when the kimono is open, then that could lead to greater punitive sanctions as well as possibly an impact on their license in New York State.
But Bundeep, every time I read this story, it doesn't matter what paper it's in, they describe it as a further blow to the city. But this is also as much a blow to New York City as it should be to London, because after all, the regulator, if they're accusing Standard Chartered of any wrongdoing, they could be accused of being asleep at the wheel.
Well, and this is part of that whole, the reason why 10 Downing Street may have to get involved is there's been this barrage of investigations into UK banks. We saw HSBC investigated for money laundering out of Mexico and Russia. There's Barclays, which had to pay a $350 million fine for supposedly being involved in the LIBOR fixing scandal. So this is like a theme that's continuing. And for now Standard Chartered to get implicated in what is effectively known as a very safe, quiet bank. They're known as the banker's bank. They provide a lot of trade finance. You don't see them taking retail deposits as much as they actually play to banking transactions. So they're at the apex, if you may, of bankers' trust within the institutions. And I'd hasten to add, this is all very speculative at this stage, and the banks may not be at much as fault as is being said. They actually claim that only $14 million of transactions, or about 0.01%, is what's potentially out of the law, if you may. So we're in danger of having a very knee-jerk reaction. You see the stock market decline in their share price as being an overreaction.
All right. Well, this is going to be a talking point for some time to come. Let's move on to the International Herald Tribune, highlighting the situation in Syria and a visit by a senior Iranian security official, Saeed Jalili, to Syria. And of course, President Assad being seen in public for the first time in a long time. I suppose this strengthens fears that this conflict is no longer just one for Syria, but one that has wider regional implications.
It absolutely does. Not only are there refugees pouring into places like Turkey, but there's supposedly Iranian Republican guards who've been captured by the Free Syrian Army. So this has a lot of implications because Iran is looking for allies as it faces threats of a potential attack on its nuclear facilities. It's looking for allies around a containment of Israel in its view. And Syria is one of the last bastions of support it can potentially count on. And losing it out would lead to not only Iraq, but not only Syria, but then of course Iraq closer to its border being pro-Western. And that's a containment of Iran, if you may, and that's what they're trying to avoid.
But does this drive the conflicts closer to a more sectarian tone, given that relationship between the Shia in Syria, the Alawite Shia, and the Shia in Iran, as opposed to the Sunni majority in the country?
I believe it's already very sectarian. I think if you look at the breakdown of the Alawite ruling minority and their Shia support traditionally has been one that's lent itself to a sectarian split between what's happening by the rebels and what's being trying to preserve itself in power. I think the larger question here is what will Iran do beyond this? Because you can have Russia and China support Syria in the United Nations. Iran is going to do something that's more militarily lending itself to preserving this Assad regime, and that's more dangerous.
Let's move to the Gulf news. The tale of the shrinking economy. Numbers out on Italy, 0.7%. The economy shrank by 0.7%, and the discussion is again moving to, at some point, you need to move away from austerity into a growth strategy, and so far that's not happening.
Absolutely. So, the Eurozone crisis is alive and well. Thank you very much.
Forget the Olympics.
Exactly. And what's scary about that number is it's not just the 0.7% reduction on a quarterly basis, but if you compare it with the previous year, it's down 2.5%. So you've got absolutely right. The austerity measures, $2.5 billion in spending cuts are great, but where are you going to drive growth from? It also puts into perspective a little bit of the slowdown in China and India, because relative to Europe, it's still growing north of 7-8% on a differential basis. So you can look at Eurozone shrinking and say, well, yes, that's slowdown that's affecting the rest of the world, but the rest of the world is still growing much faster. Message for Europe there.
Well, Bundeep, we've been talking about Olympic records being broken, and here's one, Greg's the Baker's smashing a record at its branch, actually not too far away from us right now, right. Close to Westfield. They sold more pies and biscuits and everything else than any other moment ever. I suppose there is a benefit for having the Olympics nearby.
I'm taking you samples, some can say mouth was watering earlier on. Well, look, the bottom line is this is great British food. This is the biggest food on the go for Britain in terms of a manufacturer. And given all the VAT flip-flops we had on pastries and bakery goods earlier this year, it's sort of good news to have their sales up 10%. The warning here, of course, is that look at the weather behind us. It's not going to be a continuous thing, and later in the year, I think they're saying, they're warning they'll actually shrink in terms of sales because the weather's not entirely supportive.
All right, well, a hot pie doesn't hurt when it's chilly. But we have two stories about sports. Chris Hoy, again, now surpassing Steve Redgrave as the most successful Olympian. And then you have the two brothers, the Brownlee brothers in the heptathlon. Congratulations to them. It's been good for Britain, hasn't it?
Well, it's been great. Chris Hoy, so Lara Trott, a great surprise yesterday as well. I've been watching this as much as possible. I think the difference here, of course, is that the home team advantage has been now consistently there. Sydney Olympics, Australia won the most gold medals ever. China Olympics, Chinese team won most ever. Spain has consistently kept it up since Barcelona, and so has South Korea. So it's a bit of home court advantage. Number three in the rankings is a great spot to be.
And a quick correction, the Brownlee brothers in the triathlon. I should have gotten that right. But I want to hold up this paper very quickly, the Daily Express. Let me see if I can get that into screen. Well, what you see there are some of Britain's successful athletes. However, what is right there is a Dutch athlete. I mean, Britain won the gold, but they have on the front page of the Daily Express.
You figured the orange colors would be the giveaway, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, it's great for Anglo-Dutch relations, I guess.
I suppose it is. Bundeep Rangar of IndusView, thank you very much for coming in. That's all we have for you right now. You're watching BBC News live from our location overlooking the Olympic Park. More news coming up.